Picture this.
Let's imagine you get dropped in the exact center of a forest. But not just any forest, the Amazon rainforest. You have a machete and a military-grade GPS.
You might think you could just pick a direction and start hiking, but what would actually happen is...
you'd die within the first week. We have satellites that can read a license plate from orbit. We have mapped the entire surface of Mars. But right here on Earth, there are millions of square miles of land that we simply cannot get through. If you cut a path, the jungle grows back over it in days. If you look from above, the canopy completely blocks the door. There are uncontacted tribes, undiscovered predators, and entire ancient cities sitting completely hidden in the dark. So, why can't we just explore it? What exactly is stopping humanity from walking through a forest? To understand why people haven't just walked through the whole thing, you first have to understand exactly what we're dealing with. The Amazon is big. Really big. If you took the entire contiguous United States, every single state from California to New York, and laid it over South America, the Amazon basin would basically cover the entire thing. When people say they went to the Amazon for a vacation or a research trip, what they usually mean is that they flew into a city like Manaus, took a boat a few miles down a major river, and stayed at an eco-lodge on the edge of the water. They're interacting with the absolute edge of the jungle. In fact, 99% of all human activity in the Amazon is strictly limited to the absolute edges of the forest, or the immediate banks of the major rivers. If you just go 10 miles inland from these rivers, you're stepping into a void. There are no roads. There are no trails. There are country-sized chunks of the deep interior where no recorded human has ever been. Not just in modern history, ever. But obviously, we have new technology now. If the jungle is that big and we don't want to physically walk through it, why don't we just fly a drone over it? Or use our modern GPS to guide a team straight through the middle? Well, you can try to bring modern technology into the deep Amazon, but the jungle is going to break it. Instantly. Let's start with GPS. To actually work, your GPS needs a clear, visual line to the satellites up in space. If you're standing on a mountain or in a desert, your device pings the satellite and you know exactly where you are. But in the deep Amazon, you're standing under 150 feet of waterlogged biomass. The canopy completely blocks the signal. You can bring a military-grade GPS tracker into the deep jungle and the screen will just go blank. You're completely blind. Radio waves suffer the exact same fate. The density of the trees absorbs the frequencies, meaning if your team gets separated by even a few hundred yards, your walkie-talkies become entirely useless. So what about drones? You could just launch a drone up through the trees to get a look around, right? Actually, no. The space between the trees is a tangled mess of lianas, hanging vines, spider webs, and dead branches suspended in the canopy. If you try to fly a drone up, it's going to hit a vine you couldn't see and crash. And even if you somehow manage to get it above the canopy, when the battery gets low, it has nowhere to land. It will auto-descend straight into the branches and get permanently stuck 100 feet in the air. Congratulations, you just bought the jungle a $2,000 tree ornament. And don't even think about relying on solar panel to recharge your gear. The canopy blocks so much of the sun that almost no light actually hits the forest floor. At noon, on a perfectly sunny day, the bottom of the Amazon is basically in permanent twilight. Your solar panels are useless. So, technology is out. If you want to explore the Amazon, you have to do it the old-fashioned way. You have to physically walk. But what happens when the ground you're trying to walk on just disappears? If you look at a map of the Amazon, it looks like solid land with a bunch of rivers cutting through it. But for half the year, that map is completely wrong. The Amazon basin is exactly that, a basin. It's basically a giant bowl. And every year, when the rainy season hits and the snow melts off the Andes Mountains, all of that water dumps directly into this bowl. When this happens, the water levels in the Amazon don't rise just a few inches. They rise by up to 40 feet. Millions of square miles of what used to be solid ground suddenly become completely submerged under muddy water. Entire forests flood. The water reaches so high up the trunks of the trees that fish literally swim through the canopy to eat fruit off the branches. which just looks like a completely broken video game. This makes travelling basically impossible. You can't hike because the ground is physically gone. You're just staring at an endless flooded swamp. But you can't use a boat either, because even though there's water, the trees and vines are still packed so tightly together that a boat can't actually fit between them. The ground itself basically stops being ground. It becomes this impenetrable middle ground where it's too wet to walk, but too solid to swim. But let's say you plan perfectly. You go during the dry season. The ground is solid. You have your compass, your machete, and you're ready to hike. What is actually going to stop you? Most people would immediately assume the animals. When we think of the Amazon, we usually just think of the big predators. Jaguars hiding in the trees, massive green anacondas waiting in the mud, black caimans that have teeth looking like this. Yeah, definitely a real-life dinosaur. Logically, it makes sense to assume that these apex predators are the reason humans don't go deep into the jungle. It's a terrifying place filled with giant animals that want to eat you. But honestly, the big animals couldn't care less about you. Jaguars are solitary hunters. They don't want to fight a human. If a jaguar sees a noisy group of humans hacking through the brush, it's going to quietly leave the area. And not just, oh, it's stalking you from the shadows waiting to strike. It's just leaving. You could spend months in the deep Amazon and literally never see one. The same goes for anacondas. They're ambush predators that rely on sitting perfectly still in the water to catch capybaras or birds. They aren't actively hunting down human expeditions. The reality is, apex predators in the wild are incredibly risk averse. Getting injured means they can't hunt, and if they can't hunt, they die. A human with a machete is a huge risk. So they just avoid us. If the apex predators don't actually care about you, what is going to kill you? The Amazon is perfectly capable of stopping you with just the environment itself. The real threats in the jungle are microscopic. Well, microscopic or just really, really small. Let's say you're hiking and you accidentally brush your arm against a tree branch. You get a normal scratch. At home, you just put a band-aid on it and forget about it. In the Amazon, the humidity is resting at around 98%. And while I know the viewers of Beyond the Green are always looking for a good adventure, this is just going to be miserable. Your sweat never evaporates. Your clothes are permanently damp. Because of this, that tiny scratch becomes a breeding ground for bacteria. Within 48 hours, that scratch can turn into a severe staph infection. Within 72 hours, you have a fever, your arm is swelling, and you physically cannot walk.
Which is a really bad time to be in a jungle with absolutely zero hospitals.
And that's just the passive environment. The actual bugs are worse. There are mosquitoes carrying malaria, yellow fever, and dengue. There are sandflies that carry leishmaniasis, a flesh-eating parasite that literally creates rotting ulcers on your skin. There are bullet ants, which look like, yeah, you do not want that anywhere near you. Their sting is so unbelievably painful that people pass out from the shock alone. If you accidentally put your hand on a tree trunk that has a bullet ant colony on it, your expedition is over, instantly. Even your gear isn't safe. The fungal spores in the air are so aggressive that if you leave a pair of leather boots out in the jungle, the fungus will literally start digesting them within days. The jungle rots your equipment, it rots your clothes, and if you aren't careful, it rots your skin. Okay, so the jungle itself is a complete nightmare. But what if we just ignored it? What if we decided we were going to conquer this place no matter what? But what if we gave a team absolutely unlimited funding? We give them off-road vehicles, we give them industrial chainsaws, unlimited fuel, and a team of mechanics. We tell them to just start at the edge of the jungle, point the vehicle straight ahead, and drive directly through the interior.
But even with infinite money and heavy machinery, brute force just doesn't work here.
First, the mud. The soil in the Amazon isn't like normal dirt. Because it rains constantly, the ground is basically a bottomless sponge. The second you drive a heavy vehicle into the deep jungle, the treads are going to sink. The mud will literally just swallow the tires. You aren't driving, you're just burying a very expensive truck. Second, the wood. Forget the flimsy pine trees in your backyard. Many of these trees, like the Brazilian ironwood, are so unbelievably dense that they actually sink in water. If you take an industrial chainsaw to an ironwood tree, the chain will completely dull in a matter of hours. You'd need to constantly stop to replace blades, meaning your progress slows to a crawl. Finally, the humidity. Heavy machinery requires electronics, alternators, and cooling systems. The 98% humidity and constant heat will corrode the wiring, fry the batteries, and overheat the engines. Your vehicles will literally break down from the air itself. You cannot overpower the Amazon. It just absorbs whatever you throw at it and breaks it down. But let's say you somehow manage to do it. You go on foot, you hack through the wood, you fight off the bugs, and you successfully cut a trail deep into the jungle. How long is that trail actually going to stay there? If you cut a trail through the woods in North America, that trail will probably stay there for a few years. The plants grow relatively slowly. If you cut a trail in the deep Amazon, the plants will literally grow back and cover it within days. The Amazon is incredibly crowded. Every single plant is constantly fighting for sunlight. When you cut down a path of vines and branches to walk through, you're accidentally doing exactly what the plants want. You're creating a light gap. The second sunlight hits that freshly cut path, the surrounding plants go into overdrive. Vines shoot out, broadleaf plants expand, and the entire hole you just hacked open is swallowed back up by the jungle. This creates a massive problem for exploration. Because you can't leave a permanent trail, you can't establish supply lines. If you hike 10 miles into the jungle, the path behind you is already disappearing. You can't have a second team easily follow you with extra food or medical supplies because they'd have to recut the exact same path all over again. Every single step forward basically traps you. The jungle literally zips shut behind you. And this suffocating enclosure leads to a completely different type of problem. You just start losing your mind. When we talk about the dangers of exploration, we usually focus on the physical stuff. The mud, the bugs, the heat. But the mental strain of the deep Amazon is actually what breaks most people. Under the canopy, you have absolutely zero horizon. You can rarely see further than 10 or 20 feet in any direction. Everywhere you look, it's just a chaotic wall of green. There are no landmarks. There are no mountains to orient yourself against. If you spin around 3 times, you'll completely lose your sense of direction, and every single path looks exactly the same. Which, if you've ever seen a horror movie, is exactly the part where things go horribly wrong. It's incredibly claustrophobic. And it's loud. Forget the peaceful, quiet forest sounds. The Amazon is absolutely deafening. Millions of cicadas, frogs, and insects are screaming at the exact same time. The noise just bounces off the trees, creating this overwhelming static in your ears. You're sweating constantly. You're covered in bug bites. You can't see the sky. You can't see where you came from. The environment itself just makes you panic. And when you inevitably panic, or trip over a route, or make a mistake, what happens next? This is the hardest truth about the deep Amazon, and the main reason modern explorers simply don't attempt deep traverses anymore. If you get hurt in the deep jungle, you're probably going to die. In almost any other environment on Earth, if you break your ankle, you hit a satellite SOS button. A rescue team pinpoints your location, a helicopter flies over, drops a basket, and you're in a hospital an hour later. Probably eating terrible hospital jello. In the Amazon, that safety net doesn't exist. As we established earlier, your satellite SOS beacon probably won't even connect through the canopy. But even if it does, and a helicopter flies to your exact GPS coordinates, they can't see you. You're buried under 150 feet of leaves. And they definitely can't land. There are no clearings. A helicopter cannot lower a rescue line through a tangled web of massive branches and vines. If you break your leg, your team has to physically carry you out. But remember, the path behind you has already grown back. The mud is deep. The heat is extreme. Carrying a 180-pound human through the deep Amazon, yeah. Your team isn't pulling that off fast enough to save your life. There's absolutely zero safety net. The risk is just impossible to justify. So, the environment itself is physically built to keep us out. But oddly enough, we are also keeping ourselves out. Despite everything I just said about how impossible it is to survive in the deep Amazon, humans do actually live here. Deep in the interior, completely isolated from the rest of the world, are the uncontacted tribes. These are indigenous groups who have lived in the jungle for thousands of years and have zero contact with modern civilization. You might think that because they're there, explorers would want to go find them and study them. But actually, we're legally barred from going anywhere near them. Governments in countries like Brazil have strictly mapped out massive indigenous reserves in the deep Amazon. It's highly illegal for anyone, explorers, scientists, or tourists, to enter these zones. And the reason why is pretty grim. Because these tribes have been isolated for so long, they have zero immunity to modern diseases. If an explorer with a common cold or the flu walks into one of their villages, that virus will spread through the tribe and literally wipe them out in a matter of weeks. So, the mud and the bugs are obviously already stopping us. But on top of that, we have actively made it illegal to go into vast sections of the jungle to protect the people who have already mastered it. But if we can't walk there, and we can't legally go there, how are we suddenly finding ancient cities buried in the deep jungle? If you follow archaeological news, you might have seen headlines recently about scientists discovering lost cities in the Amazon. If the jungle is so impossible to explore, how are they finding these? Well, they're using a technology called Lidar. Basically, they fly an aeroplane high above the jungle and shoot millions of laser pulses down at the ground. The lasers slip through the tiny gaps in the leaves, hit the forest floor, and bounce back. A computer then strips away all the trees, revealing the actual shape of the ground underneath. And what they have found is mind-blowing. Massive pyramids and ancient road networks that look like this, completely swallowed by the jungle. But there's a massive catch. Seeing a city on a computer screen is completely different from actually reaching it. Scientists now have the exact GPS coordinates of these ancient cities. They know exactly what they look like. But in many cases, they still cannot physically go to them, because knowing the exact GPS coordinates of a city doesn't magically make the 100 miles of flesh-eating parasites disappear. The terrain is just too hostile, the funding required to mount a massive expedition is too high, and the risk of injury is too great. Lidar is an incredible breakthrough, but it really just proves exactly how much history is hiding in places we physically cannot walk to. We can scan it, but we still can't touch it. So if all this is true, how do scientists actually study the Amazon? Obviously, biologists and researchers do work in the Amazon every single day. We know about the animals, we know about the plants, and we're constantly discovering new species. But their workaround for the jungle is actually incredibly simple. They completely avoid the deep jungle, and they just use the rivers. The rivers of the Amazon are basically massive pre-built highways. Instead of hacking through the vines, researchers build established research stations right on the banks of the water. They take boats up and down the river, pull over to the side, and conduct their studies. They rarely venture more than a few miles inland from those established bases. If they need to study the canopy, they build specialized walkways or use cranes near the research stations. They create safe environments on the absolute fringes of the deep jungle. They're there and they're doing incredible work. But they're absolutely not hiking blindly into the thousands of miles of untouched void in the center. Which brings us to the real reason why we haven't conquered this place. As humans, we're incredibly used to getting our way. If a mountain is too tall, we build specialized oxygen gear and climb it. If an ocean trench is too deep, we build a titanium submarine and dive to the bottom. If a forest is in our way, we pave a road straight through it, usually to build a strip mall. We have conquered basically every extreme environment on the planet by out-engineering it, but the Amazon just completely rejects us. There isn't one singular obstacle stopping us. The jungle just throws a million tiny ones at you. It rots our boots, it blocks our signals, it swallows our machines, and it regrows faster than we can cut it down. In a modern world where almost everything is completely mapped out, we like to think that the Earth belongs to us. But the reality is, there's a piece of this planet, almost the size of the United States, that simply doesn't care about our technology. We don't own it. It belongs entirely to nature. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. and thank you for watching. If there's another extreme place or topic you want to see next, definitely let me know in the comments because I'm always looking for new ideas. And if you want to keep going and see another video like this one, check it out here.